name is Saudia Khalilova, and today I'm going to be presenting the topic of water management in Central Asia. So, можно, да, свет выключить? Там не видно ничего. I'm going to present in the following order. So first off, I'm going to start on the study areas, so discuss the states of Central Asia first, and then step on issues in Central Asia of water management. So here there are post-Soviet irrigation systems, competing sectors of energy versus irrigation again, and environmental issues related to water management, and finally RLC-based environmental disaster. And then I'm going to start on water management legislation and discuss the regards in each country, and then I'm going to move on to mitigation actions and final recommendations. So Central Asia is a vast landlocked area located in the heart of the Eurasian continent, and it consists of the five countries: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Generally, Central Asia is a region pretty rich in natural resources, including water resources, and here most of the rivers and streams start in upstream countries of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and flow further to the downstream countries of Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Overall, Central Asia uses a lot amount of water, and here you can see from this table that the main users are Turkmenistan and Tajikistan. Generally, Tajikistan takes the 7th place, Kazakhstan 11th, Kyrgyzstan the 5th, Uzbekistan the 4th, and Turkmenistan is the #1 water consumer in the world. So climate of Central Asia is arid to semi-arid, and with a low amount of precipitation, and it's home for two inland seas, Caspian Sea and the Aral Sea. There are a lot of rivers starting in the upstream states, as I mentioned, the main ones being Sirdarya and Amudarya. And here, smaller rivers are Naryn, Baksh, Panch, Murat, Khari, Zarafshan, and others. Naryn is a tributary of the Sirdarya River, while Baksh, Panch, Murat, Khari rivers are the tributaries of the Amudarya River. And Zarafshan is the river that dries up in the sands not far from Samarkand. Generally, because of the climate of the Central Asia, man-made water reservoirs play a very important role here, and there are about 300 water reservoirs in Central Asia, and 30% of them are used up for most of them are used for agricultural purposes and irrigation purposes. So agricultural sector is one of the main sectors in this area, and it accounts for about 20% of GDP for most of the countries, with an exception of Kazakhstan that relies upon energy. So here you can see Tajikistan is 27%, Kyrgyzstan 19%, Uzbekistan 18%, Turkmenistan 13%, and Kazakhstan is 5%. The main crops harvested in Central Asia are cotton and wheat, and as you can see from these tables, wheat amounts for about 39% and cotton amounts for about 23% of agricultural crops. And as you can see again here, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan are the main producers of these crops. Overall, Central Asia has a lot of issues related to water management, and the main one comes from shift from Soviet water management to post-Soviet irrigation systems. And here, the main problem is decentralization of water management. So if during the Soviet period, there was one central body that managed the whole water management in the area, after the collapse of the USSR, the countries had to shift to market economy and adopt the new problems on their own. So again, the problem here is that due to the lack of funds, in a lot of cases, there are outdated technologies that lead to water loss in the process of agricultural irrigation. So most of the irrigational systems in Central Asia have been in operation for over 30 years. And again, because so much water is lost in the process of getting to the point, getting to the irrigational systems, there's a problem of soil salinization and waterlogging that's pretty much screwing up the area around the RLC basin and making it impossible to grow crops at a good level. Most of the systems here are pretty outdated, so the main systems used full control irrigation, so it amounts for 93%, and 98% out of that are surface irrigation systems, and these systems are pretty outdated. It would be better to introduce new technologies as drip irrigation systems. So again, because of such intense irrigational practices during the Soviet era, as we know, there has been a problem of the RLC near disappearance catastrophe. I'm going to stop on that a little bit later. There's a ongoing competition between the downstream and upstream states in Central Asia. So energy versus irrigation. While downstream states are interested in water use for irrigational purposes, upstream states are mainly interested in using water for energy purposes. So because they don't have abundant fossil fuels amounts, they are relying on hydropower in order to meet their energy needs. So the problem of construction of dams and reservoirs in upstream states can lead to the problems of undue water release and risk of flooding of downstream states. Another problem here is, of course, the monetary value. So while during the USSR, the upstream and downstream states were providing water for irrigation purposes and energy needs, fossil fuels to upstream states and downstream states for free. After the collapse of the USSR, again, the downstream states came up with, well, they asked for money for their energy, and upstream states are, well, planning to implement the demand for put a monetary value for hydropower as well. The total dam capacity in Central Asia reaches 180 cubic kilometers, and there are a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, over 300 dams and reservoirs. So if to stop at particular cases of this competition, we can mention one of the main ones being discussed at the moment is the Rogan hydropower plant in Tajikistan. And here it caused the conflict between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, because again, Tajikistan wants to build the hydropower plant in order to meet the energy demands, while Uzbekistan is worried that there's going to be a risk of flooding, that there's going to be a risk of water shortages in the country. Another example is Taktagul Reservoir in Kyrgyzstan. Here is the conflict between the upstream Kyrgyzstan and downstream Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Again, here Kyrgyzstan wants to use the reservoir in order to produce hydropower, and Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are worried about not getting enough water for irrigation needs.
And what stage of this Rogan hydropower plant now? Is the construction is completed or just continuing?
It's still in the process. Yeah. Another example here would be the Golden Age Lake in Turkmenistan. And again, Turkmenistan is planning to build it, and they say, well, supposedly they're doing it in order to improve the environmental situation in the area. However, Uzbekistan is worried that the construction of this Golden Age Lake is going to hinder the development of the area. So despite of the problems mentioned earlier over the years, the Central Asian states were able to come to some sort of agreement in some areas of water management. So for example, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan agreed upon using water sources of Chu and Talas rivers in 2000, and earlier in 1998, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan agreed upon usage of dams in the upper Sirdarya River. And then water management partnership was signed in 1996 between the Central Asian states, and as a result of this agreement, the Tayamun Dam was recognized as being located in the territory of the Uzbekistan Republic. According to the agreement of 1992, despite the conflicts, the construction of Kambarata 1 was approved in Kyrgyzstan, and the construction of Rogun Dam again was approved in Tajikistan. Also, the agreement on joint actions to address the problem of the RLC and socio-economic development of the RLC basin was signed in 1996. Next issue we can discuss is environmental issues related to water management. And here, because of the poor water management, poor water quality is the main problem here. So 30% of municipal waste and 50 to 60% of agricultural wastewater is being discharged into the Amudarya River without being treated, therefore causing degradation of water quality and causing soil salinization due to high amount of minerals in the water. So soil salinization is also caused by evaporation problems, due to climatic changes, to the global warming in the area. And here it's predicted that Amudarya's water content will decrease by 5 to 15% by 2085. And again, taking into account that there's already problem with water shortages in the area, this can be a pretty big deal in the future. Again, desiccation of the RLC because of the issues mentioned earlier is one of the main environmental problems in the area, and over the years the salinity in the sea increased from 10 to 60%. In 1960s, the RLC used to be the fourth largest lake in the world. However, in 1960s, the Soviet Republic decided to turn the Central Asia into their agricultural agricultural sector. And here, irrigation area increased from 4.5 million hectares in 1960s to 70 million in 1980s. And in 80s, the water that reached the RLC decreased to 7 cubic kilometers. The area is pretty arid, therefore over 90% of the agricultural area is being artificially watered, and over the years the RLC shrank, and nowadays it's not just one whole body of water, but there are two parts to it, northern part and southern part. Northern part, small Aral, is located in Kazakhstan. In southern part, the large Aral is located in Uzbekistan. In 2005, in conjunction with World Bank, Kazakhstan built a dam called, I believe, Kokaral Dam, and it was pretty efficient. The water level in the area increased, and I believe even the shoreline moved towards the land to 12 kilometers. However, the southern Aral located in Uzbekistan shrank even further, and it, as you can see here in the picture, there are two different lobes to it, so eastern and western, you can see. So over the years, there were a number of documents and legislations adopted according to overcoming the situation of the RLC. So agreement on cooperation in the management, utilization and protection of interstate water resources was adopted in 1992, and within the framework of this agreement, Interstate Commission for Water Management Coordination was established. And the main goal of the agreement of the committee was to solve the problem of the RLC. In 1993, agreement on joint actions for addressing the problems of the RLC and its coastal area, improving of the environment, ensuring the social and economic development of the RLC region was adopted. And within the framework of this agreement, Interstate Council for the RLC was established, and the funds were allocated from International Fund for the RLC. In 1994, a long-term program called Concept and a short-term program called Program for overcoming the issues of the RLC were adopted. And then later in 1996, agreement on joint actions to address the problems of the RLC and socio-economic development of the RLC basin was adopted. And after this agreement, ICAS, so Interstate Council for the RLC, and International Fund for the RLC were joined into one single body, International Fund for the RLC. And the main purpose of this agreement was to increase water inflow into the RLC basin. So over the years there have been a lot of different legislative systems developed in the region, and before the collapse of the USSR, basics of water legislation of the USSR and Union Republics of 1970 was the basis for water management in the area, and for allocation of waters of the Amudarya and Sirdarya rivers. There were also special agreements, and the water management in the area was conducted based on these agreements. However, after the collapse of the USSR, as I mentioned earlier, the countries had to develop their own laws, and regulations on water allocation was adopted in 1992. So agreement on cooperation in the field of joint management and conservation of interstate water resources was signed between the countries, and based on that, Interstate Coordination Water Commission was established in Central Asia, and this is the main body that regulates water management in Central Asia at the moment. Each country had to adopt their own water code. So Kazakhstan adopted one in 1993 with amendments in 2003 and 2009, after which it adopted a new water code. Kyrgyzstan adopted its water code in 2005, Tajikistan in 2000, Turkmenistan in 1972, and it made amendments to the water code only in 2009. And Uzbekistan adopted its water code in 1993. At the moment, due to the lack of the funds, the Central Asian states are forced to obtain funds from international organizations, and the main organizations that provide funds for water management in Central Asia I mentioned here. So United Nations Development Program, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, those are the three main organizations that provide financing. Also there are other organizations, so European Union, Swiss government, United States organizations for security and cooperation in Europe, Global Water Partnership, Canadian International Development Agencies always provide funds for water management programs in Central Asia. So now I'm going to start from the legislative system of water management by each country. So first of Kazakhstan, and here, as I mentioned earlier, the law of 1970 was the basis for water allocation of all Central Asia, and water code of the Kazakh SSR was the main law that regulated water management and water allocation in Central Asia. However, after the collapse, water code had to be adopted. Also, law on rural consumer cooperatives of water users was adopted in 2003. The main state body that regulates water management in the area is the State Committee of Water Resources. Under it, there are a lot of more local bodies, and also there's a basin water management units. The projects and programs being implemented in Kazakhstan at the moment are National Integrated Water Resources Management and Water Efficiency Plan, regulation of Sirdarya riverbed and preservation of the northern portion of the Aral Sea, the first phase, water supply and sanitation for northeast Kazakhstan, restoration and management of the environment in the Nuray-Shin Basin, Akbulak, and drinking water program. So those are the main ones. There are also smaller programs implemented in Kazakhstan. Next, Kyrgyzstan. Here the main laws are Law about Water of 1994 and Law about Interstate Use of Water Schemes, Water Resources and Water Facilities of the Kyrgyz Republic. The government of the Kyrgyz Republic is the main state body that manages water resources in the area, and also there are smaller entities that manage water on national level, local level, excuse me. So the projects being implemented in Kyrgyzstan are, as mentioned here, and then again, as I mentioned earlier, Kyrgyzstan has water conflicts with downstream Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and mostly the conflicts are due to Naren Cascade and the Taftagul Reservoir. Again, the problem of water use and allocation for irrigation purposes and for energy purposes. Tajikistan is a pretty poor country, and it has a pretty low quality water. A lot of rural areas don't have access to clean drinking water, and a lot of systems are pretty outdated. Here, the Water Code of Tajikistan of 2000 is the last document that the country follows in order to manage water resources in the area. The Water Code is mostly managed by the government, and there's also an issue of privatization and support of irrigation system management in the area. The law on water user associations was adopted in 2007, and here, before that, there was still sovkhozes and kolkhozes regulating in the area, but after that now, the agricultural area is being privatized. So as I mentioned, Tajikistan is a pretty poor country, and here a lot of water problems are believed to be caused by lack of funds, caused by low rate of water tariff collection, so 40% in 5 years. The main body responsible for water management in Turkmenistan is Cabinet of Ministers of Turkmenistan, and under it there is also Ministry of Water Resources that's responsible for management of irrigation systems and distribution and delivery of water to water users. National Development Program on Water Economy was adopted in 2007, and in the framework of this program, construction of the Trans-Turkmen-Karakoy, the Turkmen Gold Age Lake, was approved. But again, there are still conflicts regarding this lake. It's believed that it would help to reduce the amount of salt from drainage waters, but that's what Turkmenistan believe, and Uzbekistan does not agree with the decision of their government. And also it's believed that the private ownership in Turkmenistan will be reached by 2020. The main, again, code, water law in Uzbekistan is Water Law 2009 for the moment. The Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources was established in 1996, and under the ministry there is a General Authority of Water Resources that's responsible for water management in Uzbekistan. Also, there's the Basin Authorities of Irrigation Systems that's responsible for water management on the basin. level, and then Association of Uzbekistan for Sustainable Water Resources Development was established in 1998, and the main purpose of the association is development of cooperation between the workers of the RLC basin. And again, as I mentioned earlier here, the water user associations are pretty important link in the water management of each Central Asian state, and the one in Uzbekistan was established in 1996. Before 2003, the water management in the country was managed in the state area, and in 2003 it was shifted to the basin approach. Overall, there are 45 reservoirs in Uzbekistan. The total capacity of them is about 19 cubic kilometers. And again, due to the lack of funds, 75% of the reservoirs were constructed during the Soviet era. And at the moment, there are only 3 reservoirs that are in the process of construction in Namangan, Zagh, and Samarkand provinces. And most of the water from dams and reservoirs in the country are used for irrigation purposes. So in order to overcome the issues of water management mentioned earlier, those are the mitigation actions that could be taken. So introduction of modern technologies, including introduction of new irrigation systems such as drip irrigation. I believe recently it was implemented in Kyrgyzstan. Also, some of the irrigation areas don't even have drainage systems, causing soil salinization, waterlogging issues. So well-designed drainage systems would be a plus. Also, systems for collecting rainwater for dry seasons could be implemented. Implementation of effective water management policies is important. Of course, the countries should be cooperating with each other and informing each other in a timely manner. And then also it's important to have improvements in energy and agricultural sectors. So again, implement new policies, not just regarding the water management, but also regarding energy issues and agricultural sectors. Also, groundwater could be used instead of waters from rivers in order to meet the irrigational needs. It's important to monitor the disposal of wastewater and untreated water discharge into the rivers. And again, it's important to implement transboundary water quality agreements. So there is no water quality agreement within the 5 littoral states at the moment. And it's important to enforce agreements that are already in place because, well, there's a problem of corruption, there's a problem of lack of funds, lack of qualified personnel, so the enforcement of the agreements that are already in place is not always possible. And recommendations for water management in the area, I would recommend to develop effective water management system on national levels first before moving on to adopting agreements on sharing transboundary waters. And of course, I think it's important to establish a decision-making body that would manage water in all 5 states, establish joint data collection and analysis programs, involve civil society into water management programs. This is a problem, especially for rural areas where people don't even know what the situation in the countries are. Implementation of technical projects, again, implementation of new technologies and so on is important. Development of socio-economic environmental programs and provision of financial and political support. Development and implementation of common water management policies for all 5 states would be an important step here. So this is it. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.